We now live in a world where two of the biggest fighting games of all time may clash heads in a new way. No, we're not talking about competing in the FGC space of who can get more entries or sales at EVO, but a possible collaboration. So, let's talk about it.
Fight! Round one. Fight!
Good morning, afternoon, and evening everyone. Nick here, and welcome to, or welcome back to the channel. Recently, Event Hubs published an article interviewing Street Fighter 6's director, Takayuki Nakayama, about this topic. Long story short, this was brought up recently, following the announcement of Terry Bogard and Mai Shiranui from Fatal Fury / King of Fighters. Nakayama brought up and stated that he would love to include more guest characters, including Mortal Kombat Sub-Zero as a guest in Street Fighter. This honestly got me thinking for so long about the possibility and how crazy that two worlds may finally collide. For the longest time, Ed Boon has always been open to a possible crossover with Capcom's Street Fighter, and has even gone on record stating that Ryu has always been his top pick for a guest character to join Mortal Kombat. However, on Capcom's end, it's surprising to hear them ever think of considering having MK collide with their fighters. For one, Capcom has never been open to having their characters horribly mutilated, eviscerated, or any other creative words to express finishing someone, or even having their characters do the same thing to someone else. Which is why when Street Fighter had crossed over, it's been with other teen-rated or age-appropriate series such as Tekken, Marvel, and SNK. So hearing Nakayama say this was quite surprising to all. It's crazy to hear that someone working for Capcom and Street Fighter wants this to happen. So I want to talk about the likelihood of Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter crossing over. I'm going to break down in 3 separate categories of least likely to most likely. Now, if you're one of those people that heard that as, well, if both companies are open to having their characters coming together, that means we'll get a crossover game, right? And to that I say that's probably the most least likely thing that could happen as an outcome. And there are many factors why that is. For one, doing a big crossover game can be quite expensive for both parties. I mean, just looking at examples like Street Fighter Cross Tekken and even the Marvel vs. Capcom franchises, they have to license out those characters in order to use them, whether it be in Capcom or the Mortal Kombat team developing the game. Along with that, since they are both fighting game franchises that play completely different, I feel this would be a huge obstacle for the FGC to handle, seeing if it would either play like a Mortal Kombat game or play like a Street Fighter game. Either WB would have to license out the characters to Capcom, or Capcom would have to license out the characters to Warner Brothers and pay for the characters. In terms of development, it would be extremely expensive, and on top of it, sales expectations for crossovers like these tend to be extremely high, and that's because they're trying to merge the player counts for both titles. Look at Street Fighter Cross Tekken. Also, to learn more about the development issues of Street Fighter Cross Tekken, look at the card I have up above of what happened. Along with that, one of the core elements of Mortal Kombat is fatalities, and I don't think Capcom wants to see fatalities being done on their iconic Street Fighter characters. So in terms of crossover game, I don't see that happening. Now, I'm trying to look at this as realistic as possible, looking at what would make both parties satisfied. Realistic scenario number 1 is probably a Mortal Kombat guest character enters Street Fighter 6. If there's any character I'd love to see join, honestly, it's Sub-Zero. I would love to see an ice character in Street Fighter 6, and I think going with Sub-Zero would be a safe bet because there is another ice user in Street Fighter, that being Kolin, and if Sub-Zero was added into Street Fighter, I wouldn't see that as an issue among the Street Fighter fans because Kolin isn't really a fan favorite, and it's not like a mainstay character like Ryu or Chun-Li being replaced with a guest character. I see it as a smart move for the character to be implemented. On top of that, it would be a good way to transition some of the hardcore MK players to try out Street Fighter, seeing how a Mortal Kombat character could play in Street Fighter as a guest character. It would also be really nice. Now honestly, I think the only hurdle with this one is having WB lend out one of their own characters to another property, especially when it comes to fighting games. Oddly enough, it's really weird that Mortal Kombat hasn't really lent their characters as a guest into other fighters or other properties outside of Injustice and Injustice 2. Like, imagine how cool it would have been if Scorpion or Sub-Zero showed up as representatives in Smash Brothers. I still imagine that would have been awesome seeing them translate into a platform fighter. Now, I feel like the real only obstacle to have a Mortal Kombat representative to be featured in Street Fighter would be just trying to negotiate with Warner Brothers games at this point. As mentioned before, they haven't really been featured in something that hasn't been Warner Brothers games related, so I think trying to lend their characters to something else is like really the only big hurdle I can think of. If you were to ask me, Personally, I do think this is something Warner Brothers Games and NetherRealm Studios should at least go ahead and give the green light to Capcom and Street Fighter for, especially if they want to increase the MK1 player count, if they want to have more people come to the game, and support MK1 overall, because they are planning on making this the longest running and longest supported game in the series. It would be wise to have some competition coming together and collaborating for something like this. It would make sense. Now on the other end, I do think that they should try and do some guest character or some guest representative from Street Fighter into Mortal Kombat. Now I know Ed Boon has kept saying that he wants Ryu to be a playable fighter or at least a guest fighter in Mortal Kombat, and I think I found a good way to realistically make it work while following Capcom's terms without having any of their iconic characters being finished or something like that. And I can hear the groans coming a mile away, but I think the only way they could make this work to make Capcom happy is to make Ryu and Chun-Li, if that's what they choose to be the guest representatives, cameo fighters. Ed Boon has already flirted the idea about having guest characters being cameo fighters, and my guess is to have characters who have been highly requested as fighters who technically wouldn't work as playable fighters, such as Chucky the Killer Doll, make their way into Mortal Kombat in some way, making them cameo guest fighters. See, at this point, the reason I say it is because you can still have their iconic moves be included into the game as cameo strikes. Like, imagine the base cameo attack is going to be Ryu's Hadouken, or maybe if he's going to have an ambush, it's going to be his Tatsumaki Seppuku. On top of it, they can do iconic stuff like the Shin Shoryuken as a fatality, but it can be played off like Liu Kang's MK Classic fatality where it doesn't kill the opponent. Now that's just me if I was being as realistic as possible to follow Capcom's guidelines when it comes to Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter crossing over. I know it would really piss a lot of people off because they're not actually playing the character, but I'm looking at it as realistic as possible. Now if they were going to include like an actual Street Fighter character to be like the guest representative as a mainline fighter, the two perfect ones that fit this category for me are Akuma and M. Bison, because I see that Akuma would be murderous enough to do like a really cool raging demon and it could just leave like a pile of bloody bones or something as a fatality, or if you wanted to see M. Bison using his Psycho Crusher to rip apart the person's soul and kill them. And at the same time, Bison can just body swap with his whole like weird soul thing that he has in Street Fighter 4, so it's a canonical way to keep him alive in some way. Hopefully I got the lore of that correct. I'm not super familiar when it comes to Street Fighter's story, I'm sorry. But at the same time, this would be a great way to introduce Street Fighter characters to Mortal Kombat players. Have them play in a very interesting hybrid way, some similar way to what they did with Akuma in Tekken 7, and it would also make the fans happy finally having Street Fighter characters who are playable guest characters. Now, what are the odds of that happening? Honestly, they are extremely slim, but just imagine how awesome that would be and how many headlines would be made off of that. Just imagine Takayama and Ed Boon taking the stage together and showcasing that this is a cool collaboration they have coming up. Street Fighter Season Pass 3 with Scorpion and Sub-Zero being included in there, and at the same time something like Combat Pack 3 with Akuma, M. Bison, Ryu, and Chun-Li as characters. Literally, people would go nuts for that. I think it would be cool. I know a lot of it's a fever dream, something I think that would just be really cool to see two of the biggest fighting games come together in a very cool way. But if I were going to be realistic here, I do think the most realistic outcome that we could get, and that is if Warner Brothers wants to play ball, is having Sub-Zero or Scorpion show up in Street Fighter 6, along with the hypothetical way to have the Street Fighter characters play as either main characters or cameo fighters in Mortal Kombat 1. But anyway, that's just one person's take, but I want to know where you're coming from with this. If you want to read the article, please check it out in the pinned comment down below. While you're at it down there in the comment section, let's have a fun discussion down there. It'll be fun. I just wanted to get a fun video out before the next ranking came out. I'm trying to get some fun discussion videos in between big scripted rankings, so let me know if that's something you enjoy. I have plenty of discussions planned out along with top 10s to take place in between these big rankings. Also, don't forget to drop a like, subscribe, and share. Your support means a ton to the channel. Within the past month, we've grown more than 1,000 subscribers, and I cannot thank you enough. Seriously, your support means so much. Don't forget to continue the discussion with me by reaching out to me on Twitter and on Instagram. I'd love to talk with you over there too. As always, thank you so much for tuning into this video. My name is Nick, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Fight!